Hello? Hello! Right then, so. Hello, Jack Ray. Hello, Seneca. Hello, Mark Harkness. Hello, Coleman Gusberg. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Steve Clarke. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Tanner Velica. Hello. Ooh. Hello, Byron Newman. Hello, Idris Vernon. Hello, Steve Richards. Hello, DG40. Hello, Lions. How are we all? Now, please note, if I am looking mildly tired, there is an honest reason for this. As you all know, I live with my family, and I do love it. There are benefits of it, greatly benefits. But there's also times like, well, let's put it this way. Not me, someone else cooked dinner last night, and, well, let's put it this way. We all spent last night feeling rather ill and not getting much sleep. But she's trying, and she's getting better. She is getting better. She is getting a lot better. This did not happen for months almost, this one. Right, so if I'm at all yawny or anything like that, it's because I didn't actually sleep at all. And whilst I am a functioning insomniac, as a rule my function takes the form of getting usually about 1 to 2 hours sleep most nights. And I really do notice it when I don't get those 1 to 2 hours. I try to get 1 to 2 hours as sleep night per night. Definitely very much. Well, yeah, she was supposed to be cooking again today, and I paid and I volunteered for everyone. I basically went, yeah, it's not my turn. I'll pay. Funny. Hello, Mary Tegan. No worries. I'm very busy with the baby. Well, how's the baby going? I didn't want to message too much to check in because I didn't want to basically take up your time, but you sent me some lovely pictures, and I hope the baby's doing well. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying yourselves. And basically, good luck. So anyway, every Thursday the same story. Okay, look, she's actually making us ill hasn't happened for a while. Ill enough to be up for the entire night. Just issues with stomach issues, let's be honest. Gas and those things, that just happens. But actually, that's actually something worthwhile considering when we're starting to talk about the logistics of colonization. Because something I haven't covered in the Long Patrol, but which is certainly as a member of that, is, and is part of this, is necessary for people to have culinary specialists. There are all sorts of skills you need to start thinking about taking into space when you're going for colonization than when you're just doing a quick scientific trip. He's £10 9 ounces now and very vocal. I'm glad to hear he's vocal. He should be. Sebastian is a very cool name. She seems like she's very good at recipes for concrete. She is exceptional at recipes for concrete. Not as good as some of her colleagues, because that's not her specialism, but she is very good at recipes for concrete. Concrete. Yeah, well, let's put it this way. If you think about the current level of food we provide people, the best way to example is to give the example of submarines. Okay? If you're going to be away for months at a time, and you can't really go outside the ship, that's kind of like a submarine, and it's going to be 6 to 9 months journey, let's say, to Mars. If you have to live off preheated this, that, the other sludge that you just maybe add some recondensed water to or something, turns it into food, you are probably going to suffer severe morale issues. But saying that, do you really want to run the risk of letting anyone cook when you're likely going to be taking with you food? Supplies are going to be very, very precious, and what you can maybe grow on board ship are going to be incredibly precious. So you're going to want to actually have someone who's a cook. And the cook becomes an important person because they're going to be the qualified cook, but they're probably also going to be the food logistics officer in charge of making sure you've got necessary food supplies, which means they're going to be a critical person for your entire mission. And they're going to basically be critical for your morale. There's some level of complexity that comes into once you're doing colonization rather than simple exploration or simple scientific trips. Becomes massive. And that affects crew size. Oh, that's cool. Hello, Sebastian. So that segue is better than Linus Tech Tips. Thank you. That is actually a credit. That's a very thing. Because a nice way, as a person who watches a lot of Linus Tech Tips, being told that it's better is very kind of you. Stock up on ice cream for morale? Yeah, you're going to want ice cream, but ice cream is actually a very interesting thing for space. Because too much ice cream can cause you to have all sorts of issues, and then there's a lot of people who are lactose intolerant, and how you're going to look after them, and you're going to have to factor in that. Because especially when you're starting to build a population, you're going to want the people with the skills, but you're also going to need to start matching those skills against your capabilities. So, can we volunteer to send Gordon Ramsay into space? That's a bit cruel to the rest of the people trapped in the spaceship. Never mind someone messing up a dish of blowfish. Oh, good lord. Good evening, Leslie Mitchell. Senator, there's a reason on a cargo ship the leadership is the captain, the chief engineer, and the chief cook. Oh, you never annoyed a cook. Never annoyed a cook on a merchant ship. There are quicker and easier ways to suffer that cruel and terrible fate. Do not annoy the cook on a merchant ship. John Luke, Dr. Clarke just validated Neelix's presence throughout Star Trek Voyager. Yeah, and the worrying thing is, if you consider their various roles, they're actually pretty darn important. Now, once you, of course, have replicators, okay, yes, maybe you can make a hot meal, but then there's going to be other issues. And, oh, by the way, I haven't even touched on the whole joy of artificial gravity creation, because that's all ship technology, and that's all stuff we're going to have to make if you're going to have a larger crew going through space, or something, because if you said the words to me, Alex, you can go to Mars, but you can't take your Iron Brew with you, then I would still be going to Mars, but I can tell you one thing, there would be a large vat of this stuff coming with me. Enough for at least 2 lifetimes. And possibly the lifetimes of the people who got in the way of me taking it with me. So anyway, wait, the plan on was that the chef on NX-01 was James T. Kirk's father? James B. Kirk, or probably grandfather or something? Great-grandfather, perhaps? Considering James Kirk's father was a lieutenant, if I remember correctly, whose ship got blown up. So the NX-01 would have been a couple of generations earlier. Just one, they ended up eating green sludge. Yuck. Hello, Mealy Barrow. Just one of the earliest episodes of Battlestar Galactica, Baltar V. 5. X tons of grains, X tons of meat, X tons of water. Politician. Per month? Per week. Week. Per week. Yep. Welcome to the joy of food. Hello, Megasro. Nice one. The colonialisation history could teach us a lot. People stop trying to rewrite it because they don't like or it does not suit their political agenda or ideology. Let's be honest, we're still working through the wreckage of colonial areas, and the negatives always seem to overshadow the positive the colonial leaders left behind. Yeah? They're going to. The thing is, that's the problem. Make sure that would be half the rocket. Don't think that would work. You're going to need a bigger rocket. That's basically the starting point for this. If you want to do colonization, it's going to be a bigger rocket. Because, let's put it this way. You can't do colonization when you're sending 8-person crews. You can't. Because you think about it, let's say a sustainable population. Now, some people talk about 1 million, some people talk about 100,000 or this. Let's start with just a sustainable population, which is probably about 10,000. It's a nice standardized number. 10,000. Well, if you're taking 8 people at a time in a ship, that's 1,250 ships. Or rather, 1,250 trips. $1,250 trips. I can think of better ways to torture myself. I honestly can. 1,250 trips? No thank you. And again, if you're doing this to Mars, you're talking let's say average 6 months, 9 months. Let's go for halfway between. Let's say it's not 6 months, not 9 months. Let's say it's 7.5 months. So round trip of 15 months. Yeah, that's gonna be a long time for you to get those people, 10,000 people to Mars. A long time and a lot of work. So you better be looking at a bigger ship. And the bigger the ship you're looking at, the more problems you're going to give yourself. But you need to do that if you want to go for colonization. Strictly speaking, colonization on Earth sits into 3 periods. The age of sail, calling into ports en route if you needed water, food, because your supplies had spoiled, or supplies to repair the sister ships because you'd used those you carried up. Ships had to be very self-sufficient in terms of skills and personnel to repair themselves. Personnel, which you probably will need on a colonization ship. Well, in the age of sail, you needed carpenters and sail repairmen. Sailmakers. You need both of those sets. Well, let's put it this way. You can go, I have these really skilled, advanced engineers and scientists, these people with multiple degrees, they're wonderful. They're my science team and my engineer. Okay, who's going to be the people running the lathe? And the systems which turn asteroid into powder which can go through your 3D printer. And if you say you're going to automate them all, that's great, but then when there's a problem, who's going to fix those systems? Is it going to be your very small number of very highly skilled, highly capable people who you've now got multiple trained on so many things it's going to take them a decade before they get qualified to go into space, which is going to put even more of a pressure on actually getting crews to go to Mars? Or are you going to actually have some people aboard who are the title of technician and who actually know those systems and that's what they focus on? And we haven't even got onto the cages of livestock and the various other things they need to do. Machudosa, what did I miss? Me saying that iron brew is required. Hey John, dehydrated brew is just sugar, caffeine, and orange stuff. Not sure, good idea.
If sci-fi, I'd say something like Daradarax would be an early design. There's more space internally. Same thing. In months heard 37 is the best base for successful colony. I once heard 37 is the base number for a successful colony. Yeah, there have been some television ideas about that, but honestly, you will need more. That's basically on the bare minimum you need to try and get some genetic diversity into the group. That's before you have all the skills and knowledge diversity you need. So, yeah, you're going to need a lot more than 37. For colonization, you would need to do the desert crossing method using supply drops to get other supply drops further along, using small motions to get stuff prepped. Yeah, Colin, I understand where you're going, but stop jumping ahead. Okay, so we have Age of Steam, added fuel coal to the developer progress. Seriously, Colin, I swear sometimes there are a couple of you who must be reading my slides before I even put them up on the screens. Like, do you just jump ahead with the ideas? Cruelty to YouTube historian. Cruelty, I'd say. Cruelty. Oh. So, and Age of Seal, we added a Steam, we added fuel coal to the above requirements. And Age of Empire, well, that was required massive investment in infrastructure to enable the less self-sufficient, but a lot cheaper, ships to apply the global aquatic commons. Okay. Basically, the method which Colin Cameron just brought up, and which I was going to get to in another couple of slides, but I'll get to now because it does fit here, doesn't work. Because there is no real place for you to drop supplies. Believe it or not, the idea that you can drop something in the middle of space and it will sit there is not really likely to happen, and it becomes very excessive in terms of actually working out where all your supply drops are in space, and that just tends to create more things floating around in space which might hit you and take your ship out. Especially once they start to collect ice and turn themselves into a mini or even an actual large asteroid. Or rather, comet sort of style thing. So what are the options? Well, that's when we come to moons. And we'll be getting this to a point as we go through, and I've often have brought it up. The idea of using our own moon and a Martian moon as basically stopping off stations, as stations for transferring between types of ship, i.e. having ships which take you up from Earth to the moon, and then another ships which take you from the round trip between the two lunar bodies, and then you come back. That, to me, makes a lot of sense and is a lot safer and a lot more sensible. We'll get into that. Now, there is a difference between interstellar and interplanetary colonization. Why? Because interstellar, if you're able to go between stars, then frankly you are able to, it doesn't, distance no longer matters to you. So this is going to less worry about interstellar, because honestly, you've almost returned to the age of sail scenario, where as long as you've got food, water, air, and the ability to repair your facilities, you can go on ad infinitum. That's it. Once you've reached that level of technology. Because we're talking about such distances, such vast distances, it's different. But interplanetary, and this is the level we're at now, where we're going between planetary bodies, where we're looking at that is very, very different. That is probably closer to the age of steam, where we need to have places and we need to start picking out spots where we can pick up fuel, where we can pick up, transfer and get maybe oxygen supplies. And the thing is, we're going to have to supply those spaces as well. So you have to think about that. If you set up a lunar colony, you can make that as self-supporting as you wish, but you're going to have to send supplies to it. So you're going to have to send supplies to your supply stop, which is the moon. And you're going to have to send supplies to your Martian supply stop. Now, the good news is, you can also use these lunar facilities as spaces to process things. For example, the Earth-lunar scenario could be where you could build quite a lot of the components you need for your spaceships. You could set up the manufacturing facilities on the moon. And that would mean you wouldn't have to deal with launching large parts of ships, etc., for going between planets through Earth's gravity and all those scenarios. You could avoid all that. Mars, you could set up facilities for processing the stuff coming back from asteroids into things which are far easier to pack and forms which is far easier to pack aboard your own spaceships. So you could bring back the mining product from asteroids and along with other stuff from the Mars lunar base when you take supplies out there, which would then pay for the trip. And that is something we're going to have to think about. You have to pay for it, because we often think about these things as being, government ventures. No, they're often very much private commercial ventures. The East India Company is a classic example of them. They do colonization very, very strictly of India. And yes, they have certain advantages, and yes, they are really, really not a good organization in terms of some of the stuff and legacies they leave India with. And let's be honest, the colonization of India we'll get into in a bit, some of the scenarios that go into there and problems that come with that. But leaving that all to one side, it's all paid for not by the government, but by investors and by commercial enterprises. So you've got to come up with commercial reasons for why you're doing these things. Machidoshal. From what I know, a couple of hundred people were able to sustain a population, but it was in Earth conditions, and it's presumed that they bred with the locals. Yeah? That's the starting of your issues. You have no locals. You think about that, that's the other problem with colonization in Earth as a history, because there are very few places, other than Falkland Islands, etc., where you have turned up and there has been no human population to integrate with. There has been no one to show you where the good fresh water comes from. No one to show you what the seasons are like. No one to give you any advice on how to deal with the local insect life and wildlife. No one to provide cheap resources of labour to make up for the numbers you lack in your initial colony. Even if we look at the colonizations of Australia, etc., they were sending vast amounts of penal colonists, i.e. prisoners, as labour, to set it up. And as Jack Ray said, 37, hope no one gets sick or dies. This is your other problem. You're going to have people dying. And not everyone in that 37 might be able to reproduce. Okay? Because radiation, space, etc. is going to do funny things to you. And there are going to be the accidents. Because anyone who thinks living on Mars is going to be nice and easy and a holiday is completely gone loopy. It's going to be dangerous. Especially the first few years. If there are accidents, they're going to take out people. Whole swathes of people. Ruan, slides into stream, stream 20 minutes late. Hello, Ruan. Colin Doc, I first read about the method of crossing deserts in Terry Pratchett's Small Gods, not a history book. Colin, generation ships? You could be talking about generation ships for interstellar colonization. It depends on what kind of level of technology you reach. Megasphero, VOC, biggest company in Earth history, way bigger than the biggest companies today combined. I think the East India Company might disagree on that, but I know the Dutch VOC does claim to have been. I think the East India Company might disagree that they were bigger than them. But I do go where you're going. Those two, proportionally, those two companies were absolutely colossal. But, yeah. East India Company might disagree over VOC being bigger than them. Magnus, no one to laugh at you when you eat horseshoe crabs, not realizing they're arachnids, not crustaceans. Terrible. So, we only see 2 people on screen, Lunaville 7, who are Mysterons, and 3 people on screen, Lunaville 6. Lunavilles from Captain Scarlet. Yep, you are going to need to have to be inhabited. If you are setting it up as your wave station, it's going to have to be inhabited. And the closest thing to doing about today is to think about them as not service stations. Think about them as interchange points. Like we establish a free port or something like that, or even an airport, where you have the goods come in, might have maintenance facilities, etc. All these things that come about. They would have to be very big colonies in and of themselves. The lunar colonies would not exactly be small places. Because, let's be honest, the lunar colony you would build the mastermind building the lunar colony on Earth, on our moon, the lunar colony on our moon, from Earth, and you would run it from Earth. Then once you set up that, you would then use the lunar colony on the moon to set up and manufacture the ships. You need to go between the 2 planets in large enough with large enough bodies of people aboard. You would then get to the Martian. You would then have to probably mastermind and to an extent control as best you can from several months away and several minutes of radio signal away, when you were actually able to see each other, the Martian lunar construction from the moon. And then once you set up and got running the Martian lunar base and the facilities, you're then going to use that to set up and run probably an asteroid mining program, but also the actual construction on Mars. And the construction of Mars is not going to be a simple, small project, because one of the problems you see when people talk about Martian construction, putting some bases on Mars and colonizing Mars, is there are all these lovely facilities that you just sort of quickly set up, and isn't it wonderful? It's great. We're talking about a planet which has some of the biggest storms ever recorded going around it. It is not as big as Jupiter's, but proportionally they are pretty darn big. And you really don't want to be, with the level of radiation they have bombarding the planet every day, you do not want to be in some sort of surface space. You want to be in something protected. So it's going to be a lot more complicated than just going down and setting up a few tents. It's not going to be sticking up a few tents and going, "We're here!" It's going to be a major project, which you're probably going to want to start off with, at least, using uncrewed, non-human systems. In which case, you're not going to want the control platform for those systems to be back on Earth. And you're going to need a lot more facilities in the space than you've got on a ship. And even the biggest ship you build. Doc, the bigger issue would be doing a reverse War of the Worlds, i.e., are there any microbes that can kill you that testing won't necessarily show? Earth shows extraterrestrials can live everywhere. Again, you are going to have to do some sort of protection on that, in which case you're probably going to have to run a quarantine system. Again, where the lunar bases come into. Because the lunar bases would have to be where you had the quarantine facilities for people transiting between the two. Lance, I think a lot of this becomes easier if space elevator becomes viable. It does become easier if your space elevator becomes viable, but it's not that much easier. Megascrow, insert mad Dutch screaming and ranting, probably VOC versus EIC, yes. That usually happens. Yep, and when like 3 to 4 generations away they arrive, do they want to colonize? That's the problem with a colony ship. So, then you've got a scenario of, do you want people who are going to be asleep for that time? Do you find some sort of system to put them to sleep? to, freeze them, for want of a better phrase. Carbonate them, to use the Star Wars phraseology. You've got all these options, but they're not going to be fun. They're all going to have a cost. So yes, you're going to want to control and set up your Martian scenario from a moon. You're going to now to pick one of the Martian moons, which means you're going to need to do a lot of surveying of the moons. But hey, here's the other advantage you have of getting a Martian moon and setting up. You can also set up there a facility to launch and insert communication satellites into Martian orbit, which becomes critical for cutting down the comms time between Mars and Earth as much as you can by by making sure there consistently are satellites which are both pointing out of Mars in orbit around Mars to look back to Earth, and satellites pointing towards Mars to cover all the signals required on Mars for the various systems you're going to put down there, and build up a comprehensive, not only communications network on Mars, but also global positioning system. Because you're going to need those if you're going to want to run most of the levels of technology we are going to require to try and set it up remotely. Let's say you're starting to build a base on Mars. Cute. That's lovely. You're going to want to remote control some of the assets. That's good. That's lovely. How are you going to precisely define where they are? Well, first going to need to build a GPS system. What should I say? I think generally you can make a colony work if long-term you don't breed with your second-degree cousins or closer. The third cousin should be okay, and I'll believe it to be most desirable biologically. Speaking as someone who does have cousins who are separated by that far relations who are in his family, no, and no. Okay? They're my cousins still. No. Let's try and get a big enough population going you don't have to breed with your cousins. Wait, well, Alex, you are so wrong on a bunch of this stuff, it's painful. So far, no. You're basically just going through this stuff and going through it logically, so either that's meant as a joke, which I'm too tired probably to really realise, or it's... yeah. This is going to take time and effort. It's going to take a lot of work as well. So not volunteering to live on a Pitcairn Island. No, I'm not. Megasro, couldn't you make do local efficiency, a few beacons at the site you want to work? You could probably start off with that way, but there again, you're then going to have to coordinate landing of aircraft and spacecraft. And that's when a global positioning system really becomes quite critical, because if you want to precision land assets to start establishing an infrastructure base, because let's say you are establishing just one facility, okay, that's fine, you can do it at local assets. If you want to do more, well, you want to do more. So far, yes, why would you colonize a planet? That's the premise of the question I was asked, Wayne. That's just... the moment you are... if that's the question I'm asked, that's the question I'm going to answer. And so far, we've done... so far, I haven't even got to really colonising Mars. I'm colonising the moons. And I'm getting to Mars. And it would be still quite fun to colonise Mars, because honestly, you do want to colonise places, because It's quicker than building super ships. And yes, I know there is all these lovely talks about building huge systems around suns, etc., and massive things like that. But the sheer level of technology and resources required to do that can't really be beyond us. And a long, long way beyond us. Dr. C, Martian storms do not have enough energy to push equipment, people, small space-suited fluffy research assistants blocking the sun and dust covering things is a better issue. Well, if I go to the European Space Agency on dust storms, which I was looking at this, they seem to put it in a different perspective. The dust storms and spirals of cyclones are between 1,000 and 2,000 kilometers in length. And that's not going to be good for any kind of equipment. Admittedly, yes, it's a dust storm. So yes, high winds. Maybe you're sort of thinking about high winds and rolling things. I'm thinking the damage dust will do to vehicles. Dust at that particular speed will do to vehicles. Clarification: despite the unpredictable behaviour of dust storms of Mars and the strong wind gusts that accompany them, we have seen that with their complexity, organised structures such as fronts and cellular convection patterns can emerge. This was according to Augustin Sanchez Lavage from the Universidad del País Vasco in Spain, who leads the VMC science team and is lead author of a paper presenting new analysis. If you want to read the link I was reading on Martian storms, and I was thinking about when I was doing the infrastructure for that, I'll put it in the list down below. Mars is not impractical, it's just going to be a lot of effort. We're probably going to do it just because we want to go to Mars. That's literally going to be it. That's a serious question. Loss of value living in a planetary service. It's going to be establishing. It depends on what you're doing. If you're talking about purely for economic reasons, then I can see your point. But honestly, humans are attached enough as a cultural species to the idea of dwelling on planets that I think we're probably going to expand to more planets. And I think Mars definitely. Planets beyond that could be a different, bigger issue. But yeah. I think we're going to go to Mars. I think we are, mainly because it's just that's part of our psyche to go to that. So I heard the balance between the benefits and problems in breeding. I heard it like that at school. I'm an anthropologist. Yes, and I've heard similar things from anthropologists, but speaking as someone who has quite a lot of third cousins and knows them, no. that might be my family's version of it, but no. You don't need to get out. You don't need to get out the way, Wayne. It's just the indication of that's the question I was asked, so I'm going to stick with the question. Artificial gravity is, well, theoretically you can make it by various means, but it's going to each way. It's not necessarily hard in terms of an actual scientific problem to create. It's hard in terms of each of the various means of creating it have trade-offs. And it's adjusting to those trade-offs. Vision, Expanse does colonization of the solar system pretty well for a hard sci-fi. Not sure if such colonization would be so dystopian. Could see the betters like well-off American colonists versus Europe. It will be interesting to see what happens. You know, you can take genetic diversity with you in a test tube so long as you can protect the eggs and the sperm from radiation. It should not be as much of an issue as people think. That is definitely a true case, but then you have a scenario of, are you taking a load of... how are you going to produce those eggs and sperm? Because at the moment we don't have an artificial incubation system. So that means we're going to need the female members of our colony to take a lot of kids, to go through multiple pregnancies, which, if they're willing to do, is great. But A, it's going to take a toll on their bodies. B, it's going to mean they're going to be limited in tasks they're going to be doing. C, it's going to affect their ability to do their tasks they're probably there for their other roles and duties there. And that's immediately going to have an effect on your crew numbers and personnel numbers. So you're going to need to solve that problem if you want to do it that way. Where's what a sign? Puppy just towed son out of bedroom. Not sure who's winning. Puppy. Puppy definitely in a precise moment. And yes, gravity is going to be something we're discussing at some point in length. Mark Harness. Colonization is tough, but down the line, some will be glad to have a planet under their feet. Drifting around space may initially be less complicated, but harder on the human mind. I think the fact is, it's kind of like the number of people who are willing to serve in a submarine service. For people who are, they are perfectly happy and it's fine. For people who aren't, it's a real problem. Going on, speaking of someone from a part of the UK that only changed law so you can't marry first cousins in the last 10 years, can I say, ooh, yeah. My guess based on based on following the science is that we will have a test artificial incubator ready in 10 years. Wayne, I have been following all sorts of science over the years, and people are always promising me things in 10 years. I have a policy of only ever believing it when I actually see it. Hi, Italian Military Archives. Basically, it's a case of, if it arrives, and if it works, woohoo! If it doesn't, then I'm not disappointed. The amount of technology I've been promised is going to be in 10 years. Where's my hover car? I'm at Repul. Vision. Not many might immigrate to outer space, but those who go for mining and science could have families and create a new world or new off-world civilization that way. Yes, they could. And that probably will also happen. Definitely, colonizing planets is dumb at our tech level. Need to concentrate on space colonies. Use the moon as a factory to launch materials to assemble in orbit. Mars has early no atmosphere, magnetic field and low gravity. All these things are actually dealable with. But let's start off with the first colonizers. And that was the Phoenicians. And what they do, this is the thing about the Phoenician Empire, is technically we can say the green bit back here is the Phoenicia. Technically. But let's be honest, they get a lot further. And we have Carthage, which basically is set up as the Western Phoenician Empire, and certainly is founded by the Phoenicians. We have the other cities, Cyrene, Leptis Magna, Tingi, Cadia. Some of these other names we now call them rather than names they might have been when the Phoenicians were there. And those spaces were positions where ships, thanks to currents and winds, would naturally end up, and where they would do trading with the local population. And so something is formed. Like sure, I've been able to hatch chickens artificially, so development sure is there. Yes. I, if I'm not mistaken, chickens, it's in their eggs. Unless you're removing them from the egg. But yeah, that there is a sort of small difference to egg-based life and womb-based life. But I'd be interested to look at the research on that one. That's not some early colonies can be made from hollow asteroids we made from materials. Yeah, that's exactly what we probably will do. Let's be honest, the first mines we establish in asteroids will probably become then... It'll probably become a nodal structure. So, let's be honest, if you're starting off with the Martian moon as the central point for springing off into the asteroid belt, because that's probably a good spot to set up with. It's clear enough from the asteroid you can set up a good facility. And you can then support Martian colonization, and that facility suddenly becomes very, very high value because of the multiple things that facility will be able to do and will provide, as well as being the endpoint for the Earth transit. You then, the first few mines you establish, they will grow naturally, and as they hollow out areas, they'll put things in, and then they'll become the nodes for a network of submines. So it'd be kind of like the North Sea oil, where you have a principal rig, and you have then subsidiary rigs coming off it, and connecting in by pipelines back to it. And this rig, which might now have far less gas or whatever coming through it than it used to, is still very, very important, not now so much as the gas extractor, but as the central control hub for all those sub-rigs. And it'll be the same with the mining system. So what happened to this empire? Oh, Babylon, basically. Oh, you took him out of the egg. Cool, Megascrow. That's interesting. Oh. Good luck, Bishon. Go on. Hatching in a eukaryote isn't difficult, but the eggs have to be fertilized first. Even then, you won't get a 100% success rate. Yeah, but I think Megascrow is talking about something slightly more interesting than that. Ah, Dad Freeman. The point is, when you are starting, if you notice, they aren't going very far away from human civilization. They're going far away from where they can get ashore, get out of storms, get away from problems, and be safe. That's not going to be an option in space scenario. That is not going to be an option. So, what can we do? Well, the Vikings had some good ideas, but again, they have problems. And again, you have a factor in crews, in that you need to start taking, and the Vikings understood this, multiple people as skills. So the Vikings were very good at building up the crews of their ships. They wouldn't build random crews. They had needs. You needed to have someone who was a bit of a healer. And you needed probably a couple of those. Just in case something happened to the other healer. Or if they got ill. Because then it's physician healed by itself. And as Dan Freeman, who's just logged in, but very nice to have an admin here. And Jack Ray, of course, who's been wandering around, he's been very kindly adminning this evening. The joy of it is, but Dan, as a medical doctor will say, physicians are the worst at taking care of themselves. So, we've come over it now. You need the flight crew for the ship. You need probably the mission specialists, who are going to be the scientists, and maybe the construction engineers for your infrastructure once you get to the colony. You're going to need the engineers and technicians who are going to keep the ship going. You're going to need the medics. Okay, so let's start working through this team. You're probably going to need 4, 2, at least another 4, and A dozen or more? Okay, we're already up to a crew of 24 to make this actually viable. And that's minimal. Sorry, just being mildly distracted by the chat because there's a very cool conversation going on in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's skip over the morality issues for the moment because there are morality issues, and oh, good lord, one of them's turned up. This is the trouble with having discussing what we've been discussing. It attracts them, I swear. Got them all myself. Alright. Humans are extra difficult because we have extra long, complex pregnancies with many outside regulators, and after that, we are still a bit unbaked. The human brain development is a problem. It has many issues. Many, many issues. So, the point is, the Vikings go a Viking, and they go trying to discover roots. Which is actually not that dissimilar to what we're dealing with, because one of the problems that you have for colonization in terms of Earth is people didn't know how long it was really going to take them to get there. Before anyone starts going, well, they were voyaging off into the unknown. No, they were voyaging off to what they thought they might know. They were looking for a way to get to the east. Even the Vikings were looking for a way to get to the east. Why? Because it was rich. And they knew there was a lot of land. Well, they knew there was a lot of land to the east, but they were thinking there's got to be another way around it. The idea that the world is flat and is one same issue, let's put it this way. It's something which certainly has a hold and an idea for a while in parts of the Christian world, but there again, it's never quite as strong an idea as some people would like to believe. Why? Because, and this is to quote one English lord talking on the subject, of course the earth is round. When I look at the sea, I can't see France. If it's completely flat, then France should be a smudge up in the distance. Yes, you have a limit on your view, but, you know, it's not that. Let's put it this way. You should be, if the Earth isn't round, you should be able to see France for a lot longer than you can see it on the White Cliffs of Dover, from White Cliffs of Dover. Obligatory don't hit center. Okay. Alright, so don't hit center. Sorry, I did hit. You know. Yeah. Sorry, I hit center. Everyone else has. Anyway, he'll be back in a couple minutes. Or I could try and remember how to undo him. I might do that at some point. So, the point is that the world being flat is something that was sort of realized. Now, this can have... well, not being flat was something that was sort of realized. This can have an impact on your operations. And it does have an impact on operations. Because, again, some of the countries which theoretically are supposed to be the ones which are most keen on supporting that the world is flat and this, are the ones investing in going off around the world to prove it's not flat. Or rather, proving it's not flat by going and finding places. And a good example of this is what comes next. The Portuguese Empire. Now, the Portuguese are special. The Portuguese are cool. The Portuguese are very, very nice people. The Portuguese are also very good at wandering around. Now, these are all the places the Portuguese start to establish, places they're visiting as they're building their empire. And you might see they're looking for something. They're trying to work their way further and further east. Why are they trying to work their way east? Because there is a huge amount of goods which have traditionally gone across mostly land, but some parts of the sea, across the Indian Ocean, etc. Silk Road, variations of it. From China, Japan, Southeast Asia, come across to Europe. They know these resources are coming from somewhere. They know these things are coming from somewhere. Now, Scooter's Gap, you keep sending me a message and then retracting it. So, I read part of it, but then I don't see the rest of it, so I'll answer it. But what they tend to have going across is they know what's happening, because they're merchants themselves, mostly looking into funding it, is that there are goods being sold here quite cheaply, probably. Let's say they are £1. And then by the time they go through all the various people along the way and travel all the way across here, they are being sold for £100. And everyone along the way is making their profit. Let's say it costs you £15 per unit to sail the ship round to there. It's not going to be cheap, but it's doable. And you then buy that good for £1. Then you bring that back to sell in Portugal. Instead of you selling it at £100, oh no, you sell at £80. So for starters, you're undercutting all your competition. And secondly, you are making a huge profit, because it's cost you £16 to get the ship out there and buy the goods per unit. And you're selling each one for £80. So you're making 64 quid's profit on each one. I feel like half the colonial empires were started because people were looking for cheap goods from India. Exactly! Silk and spices and fine china. They were looking for high value goods cheaply. It's all about the profit. And that's going to be something we're going to see in space exploration. It's going to all be about the profit. Please, when people turn around to me and tell me that these billionaires are investing in space travel because they believe in the future of humanity, or out of the goodness of their hearts, I sit there and go, no, they're investing in space travel because they want to be the first involved once it comes to mining asteroids. Because they want to make trillions. They don't want to settle for being billionaires. They want to be quadrillionaires. Are you familiar with the YouTuber Isaac Arthur? On this channel, he discusses many of these issues and possible technologies that could become feasible in the next few decades. I think I have come across one of those videos. I think I have. Largest economy in the world at the time was China and India close second. Exactly. They were the largest economies. So being able to trade with them directly was also an advantage, because here's the other thing. Before you start thinking about, oh, hang on, well, what about, you're spending a lot of expenses to get out there. You take out goods to trade out there. Now, what goods are you going to trade? Well, of course, for China, the East India Company would specialize in refining opium. Because, well, let's be honest, the first drug wars in the world were fought by the British, and specifically the East India Company and the British government occasionally, in order for the right to sell drugs to the Chinese economy. There are many things which you can... This is what I find sometimes interesting about history. There are people who go on as if the British Empire started and created certain things, which actually they didn't. They did perpetuate, but they didn't create them by a long shot. And yet there are things which we actually did start and do, like forcing opium on China, that they completely ignore. And you sit there and go, that was actually a very, very, very shippy thing. Very, very shippy thing we did. And yet you ignore that one and go for something which was quite shippy, but it was something we basically just took over rather than actually start. And if you're lucky, you find stuff which you can buy in Europe for £1 and sell in India for £80. Yes, and usually what they found they could sell in India for buy in Europe for £1 and sell in India for £80 was usually weapons. That was the thing the Europeans had the advantage of exporting. Weapons. Graham Hammer, are we talking about the era of mercantilism as the base, or the start of capitalism? Mercantilism. No, you're not still banned, Sonic Nero. Stubby Pagano. Imagine a group of drug dealers that are beating up because you decided to quit. It gets worse, because let's be honest, the drug dealers aren't the ones who beat you up. Imagine the better drug dealers getting the police to come in and beat you up because you decided to quit. That's what the opium wars are, to an extent, because the British Royal Navy comes in and beats them up. Sorry, Seneca. Please don't ban me without reason again. It's not funny on my part. There is one way I can stop you being banned without reason. Well, there you go. You shouldn't be banned again. First drug war, albeit it's debatable whether selling distilled spirits to locals who haven't developed alcohol consumption before. Yeah, that was the other thing we were good at, selling alcohol. Seneca, you've been, how do I put this politely? Accidentally binned, or in my case, jokingly binned enough that I thought you frankly deserved it. I was just going to make sure, don't take this the wrong way, I had done it at least once before I promoted you. Sorry. Rather cruelly, I know. Of course, we're talking about drugs at this channel now? Opium. Chasing the dragon, my friends. Chasing the dragon. Oh, yeah, I should have probably said trigger warning. But, you know, its colonization is in the title. They're just enough. And for some reason, the autocorrect keeps changing to a Z. A blighty Z keeps getting entering into it rather than an S. I don't know. S. Ay, caramba. So the Portuguese Empire is a classic example of someone keep going and pushing further, but building economic things along the way. They're actually where we get the name factories from, because what they do is they send a factor to certain places, who's usually a person who sets up in a local area. They would build a factory, and a factory is where they bring together all the goods that they're going to sell. Basically, they set up a repository that they would buy stuff when the local merchants brought it in, and would stock up stuff they could sell to the local merchants. So, this is what we've got going on. This is an economic empire. Please note, it's an economic empire which also has one of the most fun things in history, and this is another lesson for colonizing space. Beware someone who isn't involved in the things and has no understanding, and by the way, before you yourself have proper data and understanding, letting them decide agreements. Because, due to a very nice Pope making these decisions and these treaties, Portugal got Brazil, the largest country in South America, because the Spanish hadn't done the surveys right and weren't quite sure of the details. So yes, these things get divided up between Mar del Sur, apart from the part as the Spanish Sea, the Spanish Hemisphere, and Mar de India. And what's even more funny is that the Spain has control of the Pacific according to this treaty for forever, and yet they never find, well, pretty much anything. I think it was a Borgia Pope, but I'm not 100% sure from the memory. Mayor Closium claims, and basically this is how the world is divided up. It's also no real surprise that, how do I put this, the Portuguese Empire is in many ways the most well mapped out. One of the Borgia Popes, yes. It is one of the most well mapped out, and it's also because the Portuguese have the whole time been pushing it as very much an economic trade route expansion. The Spanish are setting up colonies. The Spanish are mining and trying to organise the extraction of goods, and even then, by the way, they're being guided by the locals. But the Portuguese are doing a pure economic empire. The Portuguese are purely going, they set up a few colonies, but mostly they're going because they want to establish good economic links and start to earn some money. And by the way, this annoys Spain dramatically, because for Spain, the cost of empire is always enormous. And for Portugal, most of their empire and trade and claim is actually usually in a financially positive state. Which is why quite often Spain is so keen to try and get its hands on Portugal, because despite Portugal being a lot smaller than Spain, Portugal tends to actually be more, how do I put this? Spain is richer on paper. And Graham. stop setting off the sensors. Spain is rich on paper, Portugal is rich in cash. The fact that the monarchs of Spain keeps trying to take over Portugal tell you which you prefer to be. It's very nice being rich on paper, it'd be a lot better to be rich in cash. And that's the thing. The Spanish have a lot of cash coming in, they have the great, fleets coming across the ocean, but with all their treasure in them. But that treasure arrives and immediately has to go to pay so many expenses for so many different things to administer the colonies and the costs back in Spain that honestly the Spanish kings and queens don't see that much of it. Yet the taxes and revenue the Portuguese kings and queens raise from their empire is frankly very nice. Very nice indeed. On camera, so the Portuguese invented the cash and carry. Pretty much, that's what they had going on. Hey, Ferdinand, are you getting into the whole aluminium versus aluminum thing? Because, yes, it's aluminium. Okay. Don't go too far down the religious route, because then, because of YouTube, I will have to go kunk. And also, in the nicest way, my own personal view is religion has been used as an excuse a lot in the past to justify people who have ambition doing nasty things. That's my experience, and today and in the past, in studying history, is it's the excuse used rather than the reason for. Because it's so much nicer to say, I'm doing this because my higher power requires me to, than I'm doing this because I'm a greedy and I want to have more territory. Because I'm a king and I want to be a really big king. One sounds so much better than the other. In Morrison, also the 80 years war is a major expense. Yeah. They have lots of expenses going on. Which one sounds psychology? Which of the colonial empires did the least damage to their colonies or maybe even improve them? All of them did damage. The Portuguese had less, but Goa was fairly happy until they were invaded. Until India decided to take them back, and they were happy to be taken back as well. They honestly didn't seem to be about bothered. Honestly, it's half a dozen to 1 and 6 of the other for all the potential answers. So none of them were least damage, and none of them were actually improved in that much. I remember Portugal could make more friends like England, for example. More friends like England, for example, more than Spain could. Yeah. Thank you, Fluffcoff. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, but let's put it this way. On the subscriber front, I'm currently at 9,245. 9,245. Mm-hmm. Ay, caramba. I'd say sometimes I read the comments and it honestly makes me quite annoyed with the world. So, then we have the British Empire. Okay, so how does the British Empire start out? Well, honestly, it starts out with the 13 colonies, which are mostly got because Britain wants to get something to annoy the Spanish, and he wants to get something in North America. In America, and it finds North America and goes settles there. And basically, honest, North America is not the rich part of America at this point. It's South America, and it's basically the middle bit, which is the really rich part, because that's where all the silver is from. So they need to do a lot of work to turn the 13 colonies into something approaching a viable economic system. And they get Canada as well as part of their process of getting rid of the French out of there, because, you know, there's always wars between them and the French, and they have a few islands around the rest of the world. And the East India Company starts doing India. And then they lose the 13 colonies, and they start to then build up a few more ports, because, you know, you need to start taking control of ports for ships to go in and out. And it gets even more complicated once you start doing things like anti-slavery patrols and those sort of things, because you need the logistics to support those ships in operations. It's a good thing to stop it. It really is. But it's also a case of it's not without its own losses stopping it, in terms of its own losses and costs. And actually, one of the costs is more imperialism, because you need to take stations and reinforce stations and turn stations into British territories, pretty much, to support the operations of that squadron. It's almost a perverse point of history, but it's what happens. History Magnet. It's like British privateers would take fewer Portuguese ships than my Spanish ships by at least 95%. Well, there's also another reason for that. If we consider it, if we go back here, the Spanish Empire is all across the Atlantic. The Portuguese Empire is all the way around Africa and in the other side of the Indian Ocean. So the Portuguese ships come up the coast of Africa and reach Portugal. The Spanish ships, they have to go across the Atlantic, and where the wind blows them tends to blow them into areas, especially where they're coming up, which will make them hit areas where British ships can get to rather easily. So it's very difficult for a British ship to position itself to watch for Portuguese trade coming up without running into the major Portuguese navy. And conversely, for them to get to the Spanish fleet is quite easy. We also have, of course, the penal colony that is Australia. Hey, it's one way to start a colony. I would not recommend turning Mars into a penal colony. Anyone who suddenly has those bright ideas. It might solve your lack of space in prisons, but it would cause you even more troubles, because you'd be basically you'd be creating a giant version of Australia, but with a planet-sized level resources. And let's be honest, they are problematic enough to try and beat in the Olympics as it is, without creating a planetary-sized version of them. The British set up these sort of ports to support their various bases, and then other people turn up to set up ports, and then Britain's worried about those people setting up ports nearby, so they take over the territories nearby them. And those people respond by taking the territories near them, because the British are going closer to them. and that turns into a race for Africa. It's kind of like the race for empire is kind of like the naval race of the 1890s to sort of the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, and 1910s. And we'd like to say it's just an Anglo-German naval race, and we could probably say the race for empire is an Anglo-French naval race, an Anglo-French race. But honestly, it's not. Honestly, there are a lot more powers competing, and yeah, it gets problematic. It gets to the point where people are saying the sun never sets on the British Empire. I'll leave you to think about whether or not that's a good thing. For most of the part, the politicians don't really get involved, and most of the colonisation, you have to understand, starts in small components. The various forces sent off initially, in often these areas, the people who go there first, will be the explorers. After the explorers will come the merchants. After the merchants will come the missionaries. After the missionaries tends to come the people, the first generation of settlers, who tend to be, well, sort of half adventurer, half merchant. Basically, someone who wants to buy land, go to the equivalent of the Wild West, to set up and make their fortunes in an area which is, to their mind, effectively lawless. Okay? There's always someone. This is another thing you have to watch about in space. There's always going to be someone who thinks about it. They can set up power and money and these things. And then, usually, these people, especially the last group, get into trouble with the locals. And because they get into trouble, then that tends to draw in people like the missionary, like the adventurer, like the other merchants who might be more respectable. And some of them get hurt or injured or affronted. And then those people write to their friends who are British politicians and are members of the same clubs and etc., who will then complain in the House of Commons, and the government then has to do something about it. The government's response usually to do something about it is to load a regiment or battalion of troops onto the nearest Navy ship, send them down and land. The trouble is that tends to then give you a port and a bit of a territory. Okay, we now have this port, we now have a regiment camped here. Okay, next time it happens, what do? You march the regiment off inland. And this is how you end up gaining an empire. Simply by, honestly, clearing up the mess of idiots and being forced by public opinion to do so. Because public opinion in Britain at the time, and this shows you how public opinion can change over generations, was very much a case of if a British person got into trouble abroad, da-di-da-di-da, it was ultimately probably the locals' fault, and the British person was being falsely imprisoned and being cruelly treated, and therefore we need to do everything we can to get them out. It's a problem. It's a very big problem to manage. But they do. They manage it successfully. Takes time. But the British Empire grows. You have to have lots of treaties. You have things like all sorts of little treaties all around the world, and you have all sorts of other powers competing and getting involved. And you have examples. If you look at the South American nations, they basically very early on grouped themselves under the British informal empire rather than the British formal empire, because they know the British are quite happy to have them as part of an informal empire, and then they start buying ships from things from them. And there's a little sort of competition between America and Britain over whose informal empire South America comes under. But it means they don't actually get colonised that much. Once they've got broken free of Portugal and Spain, they're free and independent. Being free and independent is a good thing. Now, the problem is, again, that's unlikely to happen in space. But we are likely to get a scenario where, let's put it this way, while you're setting up the lunar colony, you're probably going to have smaller parties trying to make it to Mars or Martian planets to go and do personnel surveys. So you're going to get the lunar colony set up. You're going to start building a bigger ship which can take the bigger people. And also, you're going to need to be taking equipment. This is one of the things I have to make a point about logistics. Okay? So, someone turned around and go, well, we'll just assemble the diggers and the dozers when we get there. And I go, yes. Do you know how big the equipment is used to assemble diggers and dozers? I go, yes. If you're talking about if you're talking about building, let's say, let me go to JCB. What do I want? Well, I'm going to request a remote control dozer. Let's Europe, please Great Britain, Northern Ireland, right? And I am construction. I want a nice brochure. I want to see how let's see. Ooh, what kind of thing do I want? Do I want a backhoe loader? Do I want compaction equipment? Do I want dumpsters, generators, industrial forklifts? I'll need it all. Rotating T-handlers, mini excavators, sea dumpers, skid steer loaders, telescopic handlers, telescopic wheeled loaders, tracked excavators, wheeled excavators. I'm probably going to need some. I'm going to need some tracked excavators, aren't I? If I'm building, especially underground, I'm going to need some wheeled excavators. So I'm going to need something pretty heavy duty, and it's going to have to be able to be remote controlled. So, I am completely at Z with the thing, the various requirements. I'm trying to work out which particularly is the biggest of these babies. I have a feeling it might be this one, so I am clicking on the JS 330. Yeah, that's a few tons. I am not going to be able to build. Oh no, it's actually, hang on, I'm wrong. The JC 245 tracked excavator is the biggest. And its weight is roughly 28 tons. Maximum dig depth, 6 meters down. Maximum bucket capacity, 1.25 meters cubed. That's lovely tool, and that's what I'm probably going to need. But I ain't going to, and this is the thing, the manufacturing facilities to build that thing, I'm going to have to build. Which means I'm probably going to need something fairly heavy duty to build that in the first place. Oh, this is the point about this when we're talking about space. We're talking about payloads. I have a summary here of the biggest payloads. Right, so this is on the end. Super heavy lift vehicle can lift up to 50 tons. Heavy lift launcher vehicle can 20 to 50 tons. So to get a JCB, a single JCB into space is already going to require a super heavy lift. Yeah, H1. I live close to the JCB plant in Midlands, UK. The place is frigging massive. It is. I've taught at a school not far from it, and I took myself for a day around JCB World and around their JCBs, and it was lovely. But it is absolutely massive. You're going to need these sort of pieces of equipment. Because, again, You are not doing like we did with colonization on Earth, where most places we turned up, there were already humans there, i.e. labourers we could call in, local builders we could call in to do our work for us. You do honestly not think that a factory which had 25 people built its walls and fortifications itself when they were on an island in the middle of India, on the middle of the Indian coast? No, they didn't. The Portuguese hired the locals and bought this land and went, build us this, this, this. And that's what they got. This way, you're going to have to take this equipment with you, and it's going to have to be remote controlled. It's fine. I do love LMS with 3D printer everything. Yes, but you need to make the 3D printers, so you need heavy equipment. You're going to need to 3D print the 3D printers. And the heavy equipment. I would love to see how you make a JCB from 3D printing. Because I have a feeling that's going to be a very complicated level of 3D printing. You can 3D print parts for the JCB, certainly. But the entire thing, that's going to be an assembly job. And that's the other thing. We can 3D print these things. You can, the beams, etc., for the components for the JCB are going to be big and heavy. Even assembling the dozers used by the Seabees will too be a pain in the... Yes, they would be. Well, did you know I once wrote an article titled The Issues of Variable Gravity in the Atmosphere of Material Handling Issues? Short title's Forklifts in Space. Mm-hmm. Just one. NASA has had a long-running experimentation of building a lunar excavator. Every team had one shot, and last I know, every contestant failed to navigate, collect, and return. Can we count robots as locals? That's what there probably will be, but we're going to need to build the robots. Which means we're going to need a bigger ship. Because if you think about us, if you've got a ship which is taking colonists and everything to set up on these planets, you're going to be able to take this equipment with you. Yeah. Sudiska, the current cost of launching whatever is into space is £20,000 per pound. $20,000 per pound. The initial deployment will have to be some combination of shipped in and manufactured assembled on site. Yes, and let's consider in pounds. So that's 28,009 kilograms, right? Let's say the weight for this vehicle is. So 2.2 pounds to a kilogram, roughly. I'm sorry, I'm not going to include the 9 kilograms because my brain will just go fried. But 28 times 2, by my count, is 56,000. Times 0.2 is going to be 5,600. So we're talking 61,600, which, let me just check it out, at $20,000 a pound, let's see, is going to cost 61,600, 123,200 times 10,000. 1.23 something million, a billion. I have a feeling you could make a few people go bankrupt just launching the dozers required to build a lunar base, let alone the dozers required to build a Martian base. And let's be honest, you're far more likely to be able to launch the necessary materials to build the facilities on the moon, i.e. round Earth, than you are on Mars. John Tuff, only real option is to send heavy equipment separately from the colonists, so the equipment is already there when they land. The point I would make is you need to send the equipment to build the moon base on on the moon, the lunar facility. Then you need to send the equipment to build the Martian lunar base, and the Martian lunar base will need to assemble the equipment for deployment to Mars, and it'll have to be deployed from there. And that's how you get it there, because you don't want to be assembling it from Earth. And especially if you've got resource mining going on from asteroids, etc., you wouldn't even need to send the raw materials, perhaps, from Earth to the Martian moon. Main one side, the economics changes, all you can build on Earth is all the electronics. That's quite potentially what you could end up doing. And it's found out the infrastructure of just being able to launch the rockets most of NASA has only 2 cruisers adapted from the Apollo missions, and they are some of the biggest land vehicles on Earth. Yep. Vision, building on an industrial and agriculture base on the moon and in Earth orbit solves issues of cost of moving heavy equipment to colonies elsewhere in the solar system. Thus, it should be a high priority. That would be a starting point. Well, basically, you use the equipment from our moon to industrialize and set up equipment on a Martian moon, because otherwise you've got the transport costs of loading up the ships going backwards and forwards between the moon and the 2 moons with equipment rather than people. And if you want to colonize Mars, you're going to need to load those ships with people, not equipment. Are people being cruel about Florida again? Are you being cruel? That's kind of like saying there's nothing there in Scotland. There are midges and there are bagpipes. And haggis roaming free. And I can make that joke because of the Scottish heritage. You'll need to build all this. And then, as said, you'll then need to get... Yes, iron brew factory. You'll then need to get... You basically turn getting to Mars into a multi-step operation. Graham Hunt, is this all making the assumption that someone will not start a war over who owns what? The point is, realistically, is to get the resources to establish the lunar base is probably going to require a multinational effort. Not all nations, but there again a large chunk of them. Whoever gets the lunar base set up will have a massive advantage for setting up on the Martian lunar base, because they will have the facilities and they will control them. So actually, if you are being clever and strategic, the race to Mars is not going to be won by who gets people to Mars first. The race to Mars is going to be won by whoever sets up an industrial base on the moon first, because then they'll be able to set up an industrial base on Mars. On a Martian moon first. And once they've got that established, they're pretty much there to setting up a base on Mars. And anyone goes, well, we've managed to establish a colony of 40 people on Mars. You've just got a massive industry above it, floating on the moon above it, supporting an asteroid mining network and all those things. Yeah. By the way, we've started work on our Martian base. We're going to be landing 400 people. You've got 40. Oh, we're going to land 400 people a month for next 10 months, next 12 months, next 2 years, and you're dealing there 24 months of landing 400 people a month. You soon have 9,600 people there, Add in an extra month, you've got your 10,000. Please stop threatening opening up a portal to hell on the Martian moon of Demos. I have enough dealing with the various factions of Earth on here without dealing with the joy that is the whatever hellspawn or undead could come from there. And how do you deal with the anti-moon colonists who will throw roadblocks in the way? There will be them, and frankly, they will just have to be dealt with. Probably by going, probably because they're sitting around and go, they'll start off with, but you could be spending this money on this in home. And you go, well, we could be, but if we open up the resources in space to supporting Earth, that means we don't have to do the mining on Earth, which means we can better preserve the Earth itself. Secondly, if we've got if we build up the industrial base on the moon rather than having it on Earth, then we can move heavy industry off Earth, so we don't have to have the toxins and products being produced on Earth. And once we can get those into space, we can get them well away from the Earth's atmosphere and maybe even get them away from the moon, the moon atmosphere, and put them further into space, which protects the Earth's atmosphere. And also then we can maximize food production, we can maximize living area, and which hopefully, if we've got enough money coming into the economy, we can raise everyone's standard of living. Plus the developments in robotics and medical care and all the things which this no doubt would entail and require to be made and invested in would probably have, although it would be slow, a knock-on effect for the rest of humanity. And it would be slow. It always is. Wayne's got to say something. Well, let's put it this way. I'm saying lunar base because, in the nicest way, that's far enough away to get up. The trouble is, if you do it in orbit, you're too close to where people on Earth might decide to muck around with you. If you're on the moon, you're far enough away, and you're part of a big enough thing that people will see you, but they will ignore you. It's fun. First thing, build a stupid big space station, low Earth orbit. Then a moon base. Most likely, well, we've already built the stupid big Earth space station. That's the International Space Station. It's fun. If we can build an orbital energy, we could build solar shades to cool the Earth. We could, but that would be a lot of work. Probably would get on with all sorts of weird things at certain points. But I'd always be worried about problems. As Steve Clarke, Alex, that sounds like what did the Romans do for us? It's infrastructure. It's infrastructure. It's infrastructure. The secrets of the Roman Empire, the reason it managed to last when other empires didn't. Infrastructure. Infrastructure. The reason why the British Empire is annoying, for me, is because we're very selective on the infrastructure we invest in. If we go back to India, okay. One of the benefits, if we sort of the same part, people sometimes say, go in India, oh, Britain built railways in India. We did. We did. We didn't build the most important railway you could have built, which was a railway from the east to the west coast. You needed a decent-sized track running across from Calcutta to Bombay. And why did you need that? big, and you needed then also railways down the coast as well. You needed to basically do a massive railway around India. Why? Well, if we considered what happened in World War II, that would have meant you could have just had to get the supplies to the west of India, and you would have been able to send them overland by railway to the east of India to supply the front, with the ships having to go around into this part of India, into this ocean, part of the Indian Ocean, and get attacked by Japanese ships. You wouldn't have needed to wait to escort them. You wouldn't need to protect them as many convoys and run the risk you did. It would have prevented famine and all sorts of things happening, because it would have meant that where there were the supplies, they would have actually been got to where they were needed, rather than going off where they weren't because they were in the wrong part. Because there was no internal infrastructure built by the British. There are many things the British do wrong in World War II. Please get me on. But they could not fix the railways overnight, and that is a consistent failing of the British government for many generations, and the British government of India, that they hadn't built the railway. And by the way, they done studies into it, they looked into it, they kept sort of thinking about it, but they couldn't see a viable economic reason for doing it. Strategic survivability would have been my reasoning. Why is the moon a good starting place? A good starting place? Because we already know where it is. We already have the details on it. And why set up a base there, and why do manufacturing there, etc. I know Wayne is going on about, oh, there's the gravity-free and all this stuff of the thing. There is, but we haven't yet really got the structures that we can build that sort of way in space to do those facilities yet. We could get a real boost building facilities on the moon. And in the nicest way, we're going to definitely need to build the facilities, our lunar facilities, for Mars, because, again, turning up and just constructing those facilities just orbiting Mars is going to be a nightmare. Whereas if you build them on a moon, on a lunar platform, you already have something you can base in and you can use as protective shielding from radiation, etc. by going underground in. And getting the technologies and issues you need, and facilities you need. So anyway, whichever company sets up the moon base may be inclined to do so in the form of their logo, which during a new moon will light up in the form of logos and advertisement. Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if we see competitions over that one once they get there. If it's... let's put it this way. Whoever gets up there first and establishes that base will want to do something which will show the world they've got there and make them their name. You do know you're giving information out. I'm not giving out information which anyone with half a brain couldn't work out. Honestly, anyone who's basically logistically inclined could work this one out. No, you don't want to send... John South, the trouble is, it was bad enough trying to send convicts to Australia. And that was on ships where you had a lot of sailors who knew how to sail the ship. And that was in a scenario where if someone accidentally opened a door or the wrong door, you didn't suddenly lose all the oxygen and suddenly have people, breaking out. You still had issues. So you do not want to send in convicts to Mars. I know there was a video about that, but it would... yeah. An industrial railway system would have taken years to build, and how do you natural disaster proof? You can't natural disaster proof anything. When a natural disaster happens, you rebuild it. That's it, basically. You rebuild it. As happens in Japan when you have earthquakes, as happens in every country which suffers natural disasters. as happens in Britain when it suffered natural disasters, when we've had the tides and the waves go over railways which run along too far close to the coast and all those things. What happens when it gets destroyed by a natural disaster? You rebuild it. You cannot proof it. You cannot make everything natural disaster proof. You can proof to a certain level of flooding, proof to a certain level of this, that, the other, but you cannot make it completely proof, and you don't try. You just go when the natural disaster is over. You go in, you fix it. The convicts to Mars. The UK has enough trouble beating us at sport. That's what I said earlier. Frankly, we had enough trouble with the Australians in the Olympics without having a planetary scale version of Australia. And as down south, the increased trade would probably be paid for by the Indian Railway in less than a decade. Yeah. Vision, with an artificial moon, you can then build big space stations and habitats in orbit like 2001 Space Odyssey. You can turn out steel beams and concrete panels to be assembled as permanent space stations. Mm-hmm. Thanks, what? Yes, I may be a bit dismissive of other issues, but if there are 2 to 3 promising solutions already... I would say the promising solutions, which are all lovely theoretical ones, various people have options for them, I will take with a pinch of salt. Basically, it's on what time scale. If you want to wait 30, 40, 50 years before starting this, yes, you can wait for them. But if you wanted to start it now, and by now I mean probably getting started in the next couple of years, I'd start by building a base on the moon. And probably, this is going to sound strange, the technology and the knowledge you build getting the base on the moon and then the base on Mars, the base on the moon and then the base on the Martian lunar object satellite chosen, that would give you enough technological base to improve dramatically in the rest of your space construction, probably. It would. Lunar colony! So the whole way through we've been talking about this, and basically, yeah, a lunar colony. That's your starting off point. And also that gives you a few other advantages, because lunar colony gives you a lot of space to set up various communication systems, etc., that you can use to communicate without the atmosphere of Earth getting in the way. Space in Australia will have space emus. We are doomed if emus get into space instead of an empire of their own after rebelling like Cylons. Look, if someone is stupid enough to take emus with them to Mars, then it's on them what happens when the emus take over. And all I hope is that it will be long after my visit to Mars is over and I have come home nice and safely. Not theoretical. These solutions work today. The issue is scaling. We know how to do it. It comes down to a lot of engineering effort. Scaling is a massive issue. There are many solutions which work fine on this level, but do not work fine once you scale them up to the bigger levels. And sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't. Scaling is an issue. The amount of times I'm told something works in a lab, or works here, or works there, we've just got to scale up to make it work outside. And it takes forever. The lasers are a good example of this, okay? Space defense lasers are things we've been working on for decades. And every time I get told, almost every other year, I go to a presentation where someone sits there and tells me, these are going to be the next big thing. We're going to have them out in 5 years, 10 years. All we have to do is scale them up to something which will fit this requirement. Okay? So far, I have been told that every other year since I was 17 years old. Which is, dang blasted, 18 years ago. Nearly 19 years ago. So far, I haven't seen a laser and certainly not the scope that they were offering as a weapon system. When I do, I'll be very happy because it will solve lots of logistical issues. But it ain't arrived yet. So I know, Wayne, I love you because I love your comments because you're always so interested in science and technology, but you are far less cynical than I when it comes to the promises of scientists and engineers, and I love that about you because we need people like you, or like you, the world needs people like me. Needs both of us. They need the optimists who are going to keep pushing forward, and they need the cynicals who are going to go, God, let's be realistic. What works? And when I say this, I actually did have a discussion with one recently. One engineer who was working on this program. This is one of the things I do, okay? There is a reason I know the stuff I do about this sort of stuff, because I actually end up doing a lot of random conversations with people. Because I consult on various topics. And where is what I was using to do the demonstration discussion? Yeah, there you go. This is a mallet. It's not a hammer. It's a mallet. I use it a lot because I do a lot of woodworking. And occasionally, well, things don't fit quite right. Despite the cut and measure twice. It's frayed. It's made of industrial grade and rubber. I need to get a new one every few years because it goes. But it's a mallet. It's not a hammer. And I talked to them and they were talking about 3D printing, etc. And I said, how many different materials would you have to bring with you to 3D print one of these? How many? And we got it down to about 5 different materials. And that's another problem when it comes to 3D printing, because is it worthwhile bringing 5 different materials to 3D print a mallet? But with construction, your construction engineer, your construction workers who are going to be building all this stuff are probably going to need some mallets. Why? Because you're going to have prefab equipment which you're going to want to knot together. And you don't want to use a hammer for it because that might do damage. That's why you use a mallet, because it gives you the knocking effect which you sometimes need to make things fit. And they're going to warp in space movement and the heat and the cold, especially the variation in temperatures you're going to have in Mars are going to affect them. You're going to need the mallets. So yes, the odds are these are going to get brought from home because it's going to get difficult. Conversely, a hammer you can actually probably build, because a hammer is usually 1 or 2 materials. Usually it has a rubber-based handle, a rubber-based coating and grip on the handle, and the rest of it is fairly solid. It works. Comments, lunar colony side and under it the Warhammer 40k box. Mm-hmm. Comments, 40 years ago I was told we'll have functioning fusion reactors in 40 years. Sadly, I heard it again recently, but with 50 years from now. Observe. So, natural disasters are why London is mostly built on previous London. Yep. Verdun? Oh boy, if I had to be kind for it said they've got an energy scale problem of lasers involved, or railguns for that matter. Yep. Oh, too. Lunar colony is going to need radiation shielding, and that stuff tends to be heavy. It's one of the reasons why many modern concepts tend to involve digging tunnels or using regoliths for shielding. Oh yeah, they're going to have to dig in the nicest way. I've been very careful in the colony pictures I've chosen for this slide, these slides as well, because I have carefully chosen things which show them digging in, because the only way you're going to sustain life is by digging in. But I'm the world's most cynic when human motives are concerned. Yes, and this is the thing. You are more cynical where their motives are concerned, but you are optimistic where their engineering and science is concerned. I am universally cynical. I'm a historian. As a rule, we hate humanity. As a rule, we're probably the ones who are going, when the robots take over, we'll be waving the flag going, please at least tell me you're going to learn from history. This round, how I describe cynically as the God's Wonderful Railway, GWR. Cough cough, Brunel and Churchwood. Progressive engineering. Excuse me, Moon is effectively a real-time communication and only 3 days away. Emergency evacuation relief. Best to perfect the technology by setting up on Mars 6 months away at best. Yeah, basically you want to perfect the technology by setting up on the Moon when you can sort things out. If you can deal with things in emergency, more likely, then you set it up as a lunar colony, a lunar sort of satellite colony. You pick one of the moons of Mars to colonize, because then you only have to get there. The point is, it's not just getting there; it's then landing as well. And then once you set that up, any Martian colony you set up can evacuate to its lunar colony, to its moon orbit, within 3 or so days, and then they become mutually supporting colonies. That's another advantage you have. If you have a lunar orbit, a colony on a moon orbiting Mars, then you have a space you can evacuate the Martian colony to if there's an issue, and you can have a space you can evacuate the moon colony to if there's an issue to Mars. They become mutually supporting within a couple of days. Right, as you can see again, for a Martian colony, I have picked it's buried underground, and there are some very good reasons for this. Above ground, high radiation, low temperature, lack of oxygen, low atmospheric pressure. Well, low atmospheric pressure can lead to boiling of blood. Below ground, lower radiation, because you can build a protective layer of yourself. Room temperature, because you can put in a regolith and seal it. Oxygen, because you can seal it and produce a sort of environment which can be self-regulating. And this is where it actually constructs an Earth like the line, etc., provide us with an idea for how we're going to build it. Because if you notice, this is built like a line. And you'll notice there is a trough sort of thing running through it, and that's because if you build up an enclosed atmosphere, especially with humans breathing out, breathing in, if it's big enough, you're probably going to start to get a climate in there and start to get liquid and moisture being formed. Yeah, you could actually get rainfall inside your colony if it's big enough. Wayne's what I'm saying, if people learn from history, you'd be out of business. True. And that's the great thing. They don't learn from history, which means every generation of historian gets to come along and tell them the same history and get paid for it. I did once have this conversation with someone going, oh, but surely by now there's been all this history's been written about. And I go, yes, but has anyone taken any notice yet? No, so they won't notice when I write it either. They'll still buy it and pay for it. Vast majority. Human history, it's the tellings of human history. It's the longest running work of basically repetitive writing known to mankind. It comes out very cool. 20 chocks a day. I have a mallet face of heavy solid plastic, maybe polythene, and faces screwing out. Lead could be easily moulded to that shape. But lead doesn't tend to make for a good material if you're bashing things, even if it's a mallet. Plus, lead, if you don't handle it carefully and very carefully, can lead to lead poisoning. It's kind of like bringing asbestos with that. Asbestos can actually be perfectly safe if it's not touched, not damaged. And this is the thing. I know this much stuff because of my own dad's involvement in asbestos, dealing with asbestos. He ended up getting being made quite ill because of it, because he went into places where it wasn't properly stored and was doing the survey work on the ships. But we wouldn't use asbestos these days because whilst it might have been considered a wonder material for many years, we now know exactly what it does. And it's the same with lead. Using it is not necessarily a good idea, especially not if you've got fumes going off in an enclosed environment. Just had image of robot incinerating historian pleading for them to learn from history, and as the smoke and ash of human historian flows away, the robot says no. Yeah, but the trouble is you wouldn't try that in a nice way. No historian would fall for the idea of you're going to burn me. No, we'd see that one coming. I'll be waving support for the robot overlords from the moon. C. So long as the moon doesn't decide to become its own spaceship flying around the galaxy with a human colony on it, that is something we have to worry about. Using water is a good idea. It has excellent shielding because you need to take a long way anyway, and generally decent amounts of it. So you might as well use it so it's not a dead mass. Megastar, I've seen an idea for using water as radiation shielding. Yes, that is a very sensible thing, and that's why hopefully someone is studying the G3s with the idea of building spaceships. We'll leave that to one side. So, Clarke, politicians, even when they are in theory historians, seem to completely ignore the features of the past. It's amazing. It's what I like to it's what I like about 210 Reasons the Roman Empire Fell. Those reasons say more about a person and the time they wrote it in, and less about why Rome fell. Oh yes. Oh. Right. So. Basically, Martian colonies are going to be built on the ground. And again, you're not going to build something like this with something you 3D print as an excavator. I'm sorry. And the idea you're going to turn up and go, what we're going to do is we're going to walk into a natural crag. We're going to find a natural underground crag and build this sort of facility. No, you're not. You're not. And then there's people who go, well, we could find a smaller one and we could start a smaller initial colony. And then, yeah, that's going to be a nightmare as well. Because then you're going to have to move people. And people are going to wonder what to do with the old site. And they're going to go attached to it. And not want to move from it and want to expand it. Because it'll be cheaper to expand the old site than it will be to build a new site. Because you've already got the facilities already there. And then you go, oh, God, help me. So, yeah, it's better to get your moon base in operation around Mars, and then use that, and from that send down heavy equipment and control it and set up this sort of thing in sections. And it will have to be set up in sections. Huge sections. But sections. It does look good, though. So, summary. Basically, I look at all these things in how many JCBs they can carry. Small lift launch vehicle, 2,000 kilograms. So 1/14 of a JCB. Medium lift vehicle, 2,000 to 20,000 kilograms. Okay, up to I don't know, what should we call that? 5/7 of a JCB. Heavy launch vehicle, that can take 20 to 50,000 kilograms. Okay. Well, that can take a JCB. That can take a JCB, a big one, probably. Super heavy lift vehicle, greater than 50,000 kilograms. Perhaps I can take 2 JCBs. Perhaps I can take 2. If the lunar dust is basically razor sharp, tiny glass shards, I would want lunar base sections as small as possible. Hoovering, you know. Yeah, but honestly, if you're going to build this sort of scenario, you're building basically a city colony for Mars. You're building a population for 10,000+ people. That's not going to be small. But the entire reason you've got the sections and the numerous things along it that you have are to keep that dust outside of it. So you're going to need to build... It's also going to have to operate on positive pressure. This is something else. You're going to need to generate so much atmosphere that you can run it at positive pressure. So it's going to have to be run on level of biological chemical warfare. If you notice that in modern warships, etc., they tend to run on positive pressure, which means you have slightly higher air pressure inside the ship than it is naturally outside. And this is all to make sure that any airflows, if you open things, are out of the ship, not into the ship. And any air coming into the ship comes through special filters. So you're going to need to be able to generate enough atmosphere, somehow, that you're going to have to deal with some getting out. Because you're going to have to run it on positive pressure to keep that dust out of it. That's going to be fun. Mr. Franklin, here is a question. When are we going to have space warships controlled by the Air Force and Navy? I think the Navy, personally. I think the Americans have gone for the Air Force, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, whatever happens. Much as it solves the heating issue, I don't really want to live next to liquid magma. No lava tube settlements. No. Again, every time I see lava tube settlements, I sit there and look at people and go, so what are you basically planning? You want sulfuric and various other gases that come off lava naturally floating around your settlement. You want all the heat, but you're also going to have people turning into Darth Vader every time they trip. Yeah, this is not a good scenario for producing a self-supporting colony. It would be the first Space Lord. Might be even the first Lord of the Spacealty. Right. Do. basically, what can they learn? Slavkov, thank you. What can they learn from colonisation? Well, they can learn that, frankly, they need to take everything with them. They can't rely on anything being there. But this is even worse in space than it was on Earth. On Earth, there were usually human populations there which they could do agreements with, provide labour, work out, provide local knowledge. This is going to be a scenario where you're going to have to build everything from the ground up, including your local knowledge. Just on, would that make attendees of Naval College space cadets? Yeah. IO2, the big issue of getting stuff into orbit is that it's very expensive, and big payloads are going to need big dumb boosters. Yes, they are. And that's before we consider that most of these JCBs, which are designed to work on Earth, are designed to work on Earth. They're designed to work and be maintained on Earth. And basically, I would say this is the obvious one. If I was NASA and doing this seriously, I would turn around to someone like JCB and then go, can you develop it for me? Because one of the problems I've seen with many of the NASA ideas and teams of engineers, they're brilliant space engineers designing what they think a construction vehicle should look like on space. And here's the reality of what you probably need. The construction vehicles that are used on Earth do not have extraneous pieces of machinery. They have everything pared down to the point at which they will do the job they are required to do. No more, no less. And they will do it. And everything is designed to make sure they do it in as efficient a way as possible. Why? Because JCB can't charge for anything extra that the client doesn't need, because the client won't pay for it, they'll go to someone else. Even for a big brand like JCB. And they do charge a lot for these tools. So if you're going to have them, you need to be able to use them. And again, the construction requirements, the actual construction itself, the same equipment is probably going to need to be used. It's probably going to be sensible, especially for lunar construction, these sort of things. In which case, if you go to JCB and you go, right, we need to do this, but it needs to operate in this level of radiation and this level of this. We'll provide the space engineers, you provide the construction know-how, then build it. You could probably build something sensible. I'm not getting into that 9601. That's just going to cause me stress. See, Clarke, my friends, and I said it most likely is based on submarines, as it's hostile atmosphere outside and about living in an enclosed space. There are many examples like that. Don Giovanni, they'll probably turn to cat or General Dynamics. They probably will. We can hope they turn to cat. We can hope they don't turn to General Dynamics, but cat will be a good one. General Dynamics will probably go very, very space techie. And the thing is, again, and this is going to sound strange, but there was a movie a few years ago starring Bruce Willis. It has a wonderful tune, but it gets one thing in there I will solidly get behind every time anyone says it to me. And they go, and what is it? It's, do we want to send a team of astronauts to go and do a building project? No. We don't. People who become astronauts are one set of skill base and one set of motivations. We want to send a highly skilled building team. Honestly, the combinations you're going to need are going to be people who can weld to the tolerances used on nuclear submarines, are going to be people with the concrete and construction skills who work on tunnels on the Earth, and probably the people who fit out offices and skyscrapers. You're going to need those sort of skills. That's who you're going to need to do it. Probably one of the machines you might end up needing to get up there. And let's just think about this. And we haven't even discussed about this so far, but that's because, honestly, I've tried to keep away from them to an extent, because once I get into that, it's just going to take over. That could be an entire video itself. Is a tunnel boring machine. A tunnel boring machine. Think about that. Think about how big TBMs are. Let's see. If I go to the Crossrail one, that is, as a good example. Actually, no. Meet the ones for HS2. TBMs are 170 meters in length. Each one weighs roughly 2,000 tons. 50,000 kilograms plus 2,000 tons. The equivalent of 340 African bush elephants. They can dig 90 meters below the ground. The size of the cutter head is 10.26 meters, roughly the height of 2 giraffes standing on top of one another. The internal diameters of tunnels which they produce will be around 9 meters, which is slightly larger than 2 London buses stacked on top of one another. Tunnels will be lined with concrete segments that will be 2 meters by 4 meters and weigh, on average, 8.5 tons each. And 112,000 of these concrete segments will be required to complete both tunnels that are being built in the West Midlands Phase 1 section of the route. And by the way, they're using 10 tunnel boring machines for this job. Oh, and also then there's the power station. But honestly, the power station is quite simple. There are going to be lots of objectives to this, but necessarily you're going to have to set up a nuclear power station to begin with. Okay? You're going to have to take up a nuclear reactor and set it up. You're going to have to put a nuclear reactor up there, and then you're probably going to want to build a solar... and once you've got factories and everything running and you can start manufacturing stuff, then you're going to want to start manufacturing solar panels for when your nuclear reactor runs out. And lots of battery systems. But for at least the first 20 to 30 years, you're going to need nuclear power. Enjoy. Vision, you can mine organics and use human waste. Bamboo grows fast and can be recycled. Ideal for big space ground, not the first use. Yeah. One thing you will want to grow on the moon is bamboo for wood paneling and flooring to create a more human spaces with natural organic materials. Yes. That's definitely a possibility. Nice experiment. So you need BAE welders on subs, HS2 tunneling engineers, and lots of structural engineers, and TOM we asked the Germans. Just one. TBOs are big, complex, and almost custom built. Yes, they are. Welcome to the next droid. They're going to be getting them up. Not just the one you get to the moon, but the one you get to the Martian moon you select. And then the one you get to Mars itself. Interesting. We see what NASA did with the SLS when they used many components that they had laying about and how over budget and past deadlines it currently is. A tunnel boring machine. So Musk is building a tunnel boring machine company, a spaceship company, and hyperloops. I don't like the man personally, but it's almost like a plan. Dang. When did random African animals become units of measurement? Has NIST heard of this? They've been around for a while as random measurements. London buses. Usually at some point someone says in sausages. Two, the big issue for NASA has to deal with is that they are at the mercy of Congress budget, and people have the mistaken impression that NASA receives a massive funding. They don't. Current Doc, it would seem unlikely that you'll use the skimpier solution, which would be no electronics, just 40s era Rex in the dozer and remote using hydraulics. It's tempting to use it. You're having too much fun, Jack, right? Just wrong. It's not unusual to bury them when they're done. Easier and cheaper to do so. Yep. What you will have the advantage, let's be honest, is you can do far greater water recycling in a colony than you can on a space station and spaceship. A spaceship, you will be drinking your recycled wastewater. On a sort of a colony size system, you might well use a version of rebed recycling of water to put back some sort of flavour and naturalized taste, so it doesn't start tasting quite so like well, what purified water tastes like. Nothing. To move TBMs to the moon would require a space program with a budget of roughly double that of the Apollo program, and NASA wishes it had half of that at the moment. Yep. It's gonna be fun. It is gonna be fun. I'm waiting for the day SpaceX does something stupid and NASA has to take over. Yeah. You also need multiple people with practical supply chain experience to keep things running and not in the executive capacity as they just rent and map things up. Yeah, you are going to need a lot of logisticians. A lot of logisticians. Right. What have we got coming up? Theoretically, tomorrow is the Soviet Navy 1965 to 91. I might swap the video around with this one's long patrol, though, because I'm looking at re-recording it because I didn't like it. Also, the Battle of Ely is the 60-second video tomorrow. That's going to be a fun one. And then we have HMS Warrior on Monday, which I am putting together tomorrow. And Bruce Bilge Pumps will go live on Saturday. So, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to say thank you. And thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting. And any last questions? Vision, in my sci-fi stories, I'm working on very slowly. The executive officer makes a joke at breakfast about eating the same sausage over and over again, much of the food being grown on cellular level from waste. Yeah. Thanks, Jack Wright. Don't show. Yeah, logistics. The topic that's so expensive that we go from what we need to build based on Mars to what we need to be for powering an over 2,000-ton tunnel drill. How can you make this cheap? Welcome to the realities. People talk these things. Oh, we can build this.
Yeah, here's what you're probably going to actually need to build a decent-sized tunnel on the moon. Well, we were considering doing the cut and cover technique. Oh, you can do that, but guess what? You're still going to be using vast tons of equipment. And by the way, then you're going to need to cut and cover. If you're doing that, you're going to need lots of concrete. It's going to be fun. Dungeon Manning, is that the one where the entire Pacific Fleet Command gets drunk and forces their pilot to take off in an overloaded aircraft? I think that's already happened, and I think I avoided that because I was talking about everything else, and it got. Basically, the last video ended up being over nearly 2 hours long from memory. Let me just check. Content. This is the trouble with producing a video almost every day. It does cause it fun. Soviet Navy. Cresta. Soviet Navy, 1956-65. Yeah, that was an hour and 45 minutes. Pretty much. So, yeah, this one's looking like it could be long as well. One from last stream. Warspite is fitted with a heavy Gustav. What happens? Goodbye Vienna. No, seriously. If it's fitted with heavy Gustav, depends how it's fitted, where it's fitted. It's probably going to be fixed to fire along a single axis, so you're having to point where it shoots. So basically, you can use it for shore bombardment. Take care, History Vanguard. I love the content, but I don't have enough time to keep it up with all. Yeah, that's a good thing for me. Take care, Wayne. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Seneca. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Dan, for doing all the for the three of you doing the adminning. Thank you, John Shea, Just Funk, History Vanguard. Thank you, Dutchman. Thank you, Megastro. And it's still done. On a different topic. After Renown last week, I own it to liking the floating bricks on Nalrod's motto. Are you sure you want to fight us? Every access ship on the... Nope. Listen, how daft is Ireland operating 7 Type 42 batch frees, 11 MECO 240s, 2 Type 12M frigates, 3 Fearless Class LPDs, 3 Fort Victoria and 4 upholders? Where are they getting the money from? And the personnel? And the people? And then there's the infrastructure. That's that's quite a lot of Ireland. Are they taking over Plymouth as well? And probably Portsmouth. That's what. Oh, getting concrete in space on Luna A without using water and the associated chemical reactions? That'd be fun. And what your sister would say about it. Basically, she'd go, you need... there's some very interesting ideas for how you make that concrete. Sea Dollars, imagine the size of X-Suit needed for cut and cover. The German imagine it would be enormous. This is my point. We would go, oh, well, we wouldn't use the tunnel boring machine. We'd do a cut and cover. I go, you think that's going to be any smaller challenge to get up there? Seriously? Have you seen the size of vehicles you'll need for that? Because those vehicles will then have to be made space viable for their crew. Okay? Because you're not going to be able to remote control them from Earth. You've got a 3 minutes delay. That's asking for accidents to happen, unless they are incredibly advanced in terms of uncrewed technology. And then if something goes wrong, you're still going to have someone there to fix it. So you might as well have a pilot on board. They might be massively automated, and there might be a lot of systems there, but actually having someone physically in the cab is going to be advantageous. It's fun. Thank you, Servant Kratu. Thank you, Danifaka. Thank you, Rowan. Thank you. Big solar mirror melting the regolith. Oh, yeah, that'll happen. It's coming out Saturday. Build Trumps 113 is Saturday. Last one, how many OPVs could the Irish Navy get away with? They're probably currently getting away with a fair number, so I think that's probably their limit. That'd be fun. Thank you, History Vanguard. I'd love to do meetups. Right. take care, everyone. Enjoy. Da 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 da. Da, da. Agreed that's the point of the NASA competition, Joss Vonk, but also agreed that they really need to be more sensible in it. I have messages. What are they from?